All right, welcome on. The game is not over, but it is currently 100-65 in the fourth quarter. So I'm gonna go ahead and tweet this thing out to let people know that we are starting, and then
Hmm.
we will start after I tweet this out to let people know that we are starting. That's how this works. All right. Your reaction simply to the fact that this was this much of a blowout.
Jason Tatum, his opinion about the officiating tonight.
Wait, huh? Get the outside hand. Let's see. There we go. Oh, wait, hold on. Let's get it right for the camera. Yeah. All right, so the whole Porzingis is available, but he's only gonna play an emergency thing. All right, let's do podcasts. Welcome on to a Friday night edition of Dunked on Prime, and the NBA season is going to go on for at least one game longer. Monday night shall be Game 5 in Boston, as it is currently 106-67 Dallas. A complete blowout in the end, and certainly Dallas scored well. They did a lot of other stuff on offense. Not all of that was like shocking to me that they were able to be better offensively in some of these ways. Clearly, Boston just was out of it mentally, basically from the beginning of the second quarter on, and just didn't come to play tonight in a number of ways. But I think where I want to start, Danny, is the defense that Dallas put out there, because for the first time, they looked like they were actually causing problems for Boston on their defensive end.
For sure. And there were changes in the approach that led to that. And we saw the inklings of this in game 3, though it got more clear in game 4. And part of the fun of doing this as a live show is that we're talking about it in the moment. And Dallas made a significantly more concerted effort from the jump to keep their center closer to the basket. And you saw those dividends in the distribution of shots for the Boston Celtics. Boston in the first half, I don't know where we're defining the competitive portion of the game, but in the first half, Boston had 7 attempts in the restricted area. And then they were 1 of 11 in the upper paint. They didn't take a single mid ranger. There were only 3 mid rangers taken combined in the first half of this game. And so what the Mavs were doing, and you brought this up as being in some ways similar to what Boston does, is keep the center, Lively, Gafford, at times Kleba, closer to the basket. And so it made Boston's attempts harder. And it's the half court attempt. So they were getting all these layups, getting everything around the basket in the first 3 games. And then the attempts were harder. And even if those attempts, the threes and some of the floater shots go in at a better rate in a game 5, the distribution, like let's say the location effective field goal percentage for the Celtics was worse in game 4. And that's really important for the Mavs.
Yeah, Dallas started doing this in game 3 even more. Most of what we saw, of course, in the OKC series in particular, that caused them a bunch of problems. In the Minnesota series, it didn't matter because they could just put the center on Rudy Gobert and he was always around. But against these ostensibly stretch 5 teams, I think early on they were concerned about some of the matchups. They're concerned about keeping Luka out of a Tatum or a Braun matchup, or the same thing for Kyrie. They did a lot more switching to leave their center out on the perimeter above the break. And I think what they eventually realized is they're going to hunt Luka so much anyway. Does it really matter that much if he starts out on that matchup? Because I think they were doing a lot of stuff to try to prevent a bad matchup on the perimeter, including switching their center out. And so then they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to be screwed regardless defensively. The Luka was way better defensively tonight, by the way.
Yes.
But let's just keep our center near the rim all the time. And you know what? If he's guarding a corner shooter, like Lively can get out there sometimes, or someone else is just going to have to rotate there. But we are right now taking away nothing, and we have to take away something. And so in the end, they certainly took away the paint. Boston took only 12 as of right now, with 8 minutes left in the fourth. They've taken only 12 shots at the rim and made 7 of them. And they are 3 of 15 upper paint. And the 3 guys who really shoot the most upper paint, number one, those guys are not getting all the way to the rim the way they were. Brown, Tatum, and Holiday. And those guys are combined 2 of 12 in the upper paint, in part because they can't get all the way to the rim and finish. And so they have to take tougher floater shots. They can't go like drive as hard when the big is back there either. And yeah, Boston certainly could make more threes, could punish them more, could get them out of that more. But they still have only taken 6 corner threes in the game as well. So Dallas has really had their cake and eaten it too, just forced them to live on above the break threes, in which they're 7 of 29, and the upper paint, where they're not a great upper paint shooting team.
And so this ties in with something that is notable as we move to a game 5 in the series, which is, yes, the Boston Celtics can do better from some of the ranges than they did. So, like, for example, 11 to 36 from 3, they were 5 of 19 from 3 during the first half. So yes, of course, they can do better in that area. And then if you want to look at the, that 1 of 11 in the floater range. So sure, they can do better on those shots. That can be up there. And so after 3 quarters, the Celtics had an 88.2 first shot half court offensive rating. They can do better there and do that. But what I really like about the Mavericks approach is that it will be challenging. It'll be more challenging for the Celtics in the half court to get good shots. And this was also not only because of the feedback loop stuff, because Dallas was successful in the times they ran. And actually, before we get into Dallas's half court offense, I think the other big story of the competitive portion of game 4 was what I was about to mention in passing, but it's worth emphasizing now, which is the glass. And so in the first 3 quarters of this game, Dallas had an offensive rebound rate of 39%, and the Celtics had an offensive rebound rate of 8.8% per cleaning the glass. And so that leads to significantly more possessions during the first 3 quarters of this game. Actually, let's do the first half. First half of the game, Boston took 37 shots and 9 free throws. The Mavs took 44 shots and 16 free throws. So that's a lot more shooting possessions. And the turnover margin was actually pretty close. And that was a lot of that was Derek Lively. They were fantastic on the glass in his minutes, but a more concerted effort overall for the Mavs. And so they were able to use their size in a couple ways, but most notably on the glass, to make life harder on the Celtics, generate extra possessions.
Yeah, that was huge. And I think that usually the play better adjustment more applies to the defensive end and the effort categories. And certainly that helped. I mean, that was the biggest thing for Dallas, even more than anything you want to point to strategically. They played some different players a little bit, as we'll get to also. And that's part of how they played better and played harder. And Luka, again, to say it, like, he got beat a few times, but he competed a few times. There are at least a few times where, like, he actually was able to stone the guy or stay with him a little bit, at least until the help at the rim could impact a little bit. So he wasn't a total embarrassment in this game the way he was in games 2 and 3, and that was a big difference in this one. And maybe it was determination, maybe it was feeling better, maybe it was not being taken out of it mentally by the referees. Maybe it was Jason Tatum. He just like swapped composure with Jason Tatum somehow in like a Parent Trap-esque sort of situation.
I was thinking they found some sort of fountain in Dallas, but whatever, it's fine.
But then, and certainly playing harder on the offensive glass was a big thing. They really took advantage of the likes of White and Pritchard, both with like little quick post ups from Kleba, or most often Derek Lively getting position on the weak side against a guard and being able to just go over them and tip the ball out. And then also Luka Doncic just played better offensively. We talked about how many shots that he normally makes that he missed in game 3. I thought he was actually getting pretty good shots for the most part. And I don't know that his shot diet was particularly different in this game than it was in game 3. He started off getting all the way to the rim. I do think that the Celtics just did not show enough help early in some of these circumstances, because the fact that they were missing all the time, they're just so much worse when they can't set up their defense and sort of like getting all their help cues lined up and getting everyone in a position. And so, but Luka, he made a bunch of mid-rangers. He made a bunch of upper paint. Mavs during the competitive portion of the game are 12 of 20 in that upper paint after they struggled from there in game 3. They're one of the best teams from there. Luka and Kyrie are two of the best in the game from there. They got to the rim more too. And they hit some threes early, but the three was not like a huge part of it. They still only got up 4 corner threes as of right now. So I think it really was Luka and also Kyrie just being more effective off the dribble and scoring the way they needed to. And then it wasn't so much that the other guys were like, they were double teaming and getting open threes. Like those guys were scoring better. And then the other guys kind of took more attention by getting on the offensive glass. And Washington hit a couple of threes. Exum hit one, but still was not like a major factor that the other guys were like getting so involved, other than what they were doing off of the effort plays.
Agreed. And just part of the story of this game is that Irving and Doncic, they did almost all of their damage from 2. Luka was 0 for 8 on threes. Kyrie was 1 for 6. So they were combined 1 for 14 there. But then Irving was 9 for 12 on 2s, and Luka was 12 for, I think he was 12 for 18. So I mean, that's pretty ridiculous from both of those guys. Can be a real offensive boon when you can have those guys doing that. And then a change that Jason Kidd made that really reaped some dividends was that Dante Exum, love of my basketball life, was kind of the first guy they tried outside of the norm and did a really nice job. And so Exum in the second half, he starts the second quarter and gives them a little bit of pace in some transition opportunities, pushes the ball a little bit. I think he's a more competent defender. He would have shot better from 3 were one of his not taken away, but he did step out of bounds. It was taken away after the fact. And I criticized Kidd for having Hardaway leaning on him heavily instead of Exum in game 3. I think Exum is a more complete player, and we saw the reasons why he makes more sense in that spot. I would have played him even more than Kidd did, but good to see him out there.
Yeah, I do think he's a better defender than Josh Green and a better shooter, and could get some of those minutes too. And he gave him a few things. He gave him, a couple of pushes in transition here or there. Even when he's not able to get all the way to the rim or anything, he at least just gets him into the front court faster and saves Luka the energy. And now Luka has 17 seconds to work with instead of 12. Like even that, it has some value. The other thing he was able to do was actually be the ball handler and pick and roll with Luka, get a switch and get Luka the ball with a live dribble at the free throw line, which is also useful. And just like getting him the ball against a mismatch anywhere on the floor with a live dribble, where he hasn't had to just use up all of his energy, just even getting the ball up, getting into position, is really solid as well. And then Kyrie can be off the ball if Exum is on the ball in that situation. And so then he gives them another shooter that you can't leave. So it does kind of open things up a little bit more, takes the pressure off of those guys. And he's just a smart passer in the half court. And he hit a couple of shots, though one of them got taken away since he stepped on the sideline. So I thought that was big rotationally as well. Part of this was because Washington got in foul trouble in the first half, but we did see more of Kleba at the 4. Gafford only played 10 minutes, and he was solid in his time. After like being pretty bad the first 3 minutes or so, I thought maybe we're not going to see him that much again. But then he had some nice plays at the start of the third, posting up. He got 4 quick free throws there on Tatum, and then he tried to post up Holiday. That didn't well, but and Derek Jones Jr. didn't play as much either. So Kleba and Exum were the two guys. Green played about the same as the last one, who played more. Kleba hit a big 3 at the end of the second quarter off a flare screen. That if he hits just enough, that's helpful. And then there are also plays where if they did get the center switched out on the perimeter, he was able to come over and present another obstacle at the rim, at least somewhat, for the Celtics, make them pull up for a floater, which of course they weren't going to make tonight.
Speaking of surprising corner threes, Derek Lively hit one. It was the first 3-pointer that Lively has hit in in a competition, like in a game that counted since March of the ACC tournament, his year at Duke. He hit 2 as a Dookie, and then he didn't hit any so far in his Mavericks tenure. He took a couple, but didn't make them. We'll see whether that shot comes into his repertoire at some point. He's such a good role man that he needs it less than the average player. Like you and I love centers who could shoot, but he's a threat in another way. They could, of course, deploy it should that come to pass. And so, it was fun. It was a novelty. The Mavs loved it. The crowd loved it. And so, but more of a curiosity from this game than something I'm going gaga over.
Yeah, apparently the Mavs are threatening right now to have the largest win in finals history. It was 42 by the Bulls on a game we've referenced pretty recently, actually, for lowest scoring game in the finals. Game 3 of the 98 finals against Chicago for the Jazz. Tim Hardaway Jr. is 5 of 6 from 3. Tim Hardaway Jr. being 5 of 6 from 3 in garbage time is apropos.
It's perfect.
And yeah, so a bunch of Celtics fans came down expecting to see a coronation. They didn't see that in this one. Anything else from this one, or should we turn to some of the adjustments?
Yes. I thought that the Mavericks, as expected, did a much better job guarding, or in this case, not guarding Xavier Tillman, who we weren't sure which Maverick was going to take over the Porzingis minutes in game 3. I had expected that Cornette was going to get the first try, but thought Tillman would be the most successful. And so Tillman really hadn't played in the series before game 3. They did a better job in the second half of that one, not guarding him, but it was just kind of too late for anything to really change there. And so that led to the Celtics being outscored by 13 points during the 7.5 minutes Tillman played in the first half. It probably won't be that extreme in game 5, but those limitations are there. And it's, Tillman, I thought that the defensive stuff didn't go quite as well for him as it did in game 3, where like Luka, especially because of those second half minutes against Luka, where Luka just didn't have quite the same burst. The shot had worn off a little bit more, the injection, I guess, technically. And so those minutes are going to be more of an offensive struggle. You can use Tillman as a screener. You can go to some of that stuff, but the Mavs doing a better job that increased their margin for error.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Xavier Tillman is not the reason they lost. I thought he got beaten a couple times early, and then actually I thought he held up pretty well defensively against Luka. Then Luka actually did much better to hunt Sam Hauser on the way to his 25-point first half.
I mean, should we talk about Jason Tatum's battle with the refs in this one? Is that not really? I mean, it's a part of the story.
No, it is because if you're going to crap on Luka for it in game 3, you got to do it with Tatum here, particularly because I thought Tatum had even less of a complaint than Luka did on a lot of these plays, where because he initiates the contact so much, and there were just a bunch of plays. I mean, the most salient one was on that Kleba corner 3 where there was a flare screen. I guess he thought there was an illegal screen, or maybe he was complaining about something that happened on offense on the other end. But there's 8 seconds left in the half, and he's not running into the front court to go talk to the referee as Jaylen Brown is trying to bring the ball up and score at the end of the half. And so Tatum ends up getting the ball, but he had gotten into the front court so late that he couldn't get his shot off. He didn't give them a passer or a guy to pass to until right at the end. And so he's late to get his shot off. Not that he made it anyway. But yeah, his drives, he was getting really frustrated thinking there was contact on drives. I mean, there just wasn't. There was a play
where he shoved PJ Washington with that noted Tatum off arm, pushed him twice. And then he's complaining that he didn't get a foul call. PJ Washington didn't foul him at all. If there was a foul in the play, which I do not think that there was, it would have been an offensive foul on Tatum.
Yeah, there was one play, I think, where Luka came over to help, jumped A to B and jumped into him, but that they didn't call the foul on. But other than that, I thought whatever he was looking for was very soft. And hey, congrats to Luka for actually jumping over and getting his chest on him enough to make that play, right? Luka didn't get destroyed as the low man, in part because they kept the center close to the hoop as well.
And then even though the game result was pretty much done at that point, Tatum also picks up 2 quick fouls at the beginning of the third quarter, and then that's 4 for him, and it's already basically over, but it's really over. And so, if you are the best player on your team, there is an element of leadership that comes with that, even if you don't have to be the emotional leader or all that type of stuff. And Tatum, it's part of it is losing your composure even if you're right, and then a part of it is like he was also wrong, and so that didn't help the Celtics. It's not the reason they lost, but it didn't help. And like, and especially like some of the stuff like, oh, you're making a like the money gesture, which what Luca did as well. It's just like,
Yeah, although
no,
it's unclear actually whether he did do that, but Tim kind of said he looked back at the film, he wasn't sure if he did it or
okay,
not in the
well,
next game.
we
But
we won't Zapruder that. I'm sure somebody will. And so, by
yeah,
the way, final score 122-84 in favor of the Mavericks, who also, by virtue of this win, won't have the lowest scoring NBA Finals in NBA history in all likelihood because they, like in terms of points per game, because they're
relative to their own regular
regular
season
season.
output,
Yeah.
right? Like what Dan wrote about today. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So, as far as adjustments going forward here, I mean, let's talk about Porzingis first. The report was that he could be available. He was moving around some, went through a workout, but it would be, in like emergencies or something. I mean, I guess we have no way of knowing if that was really true or not. Obviously, it's tough to have an emergency when you're down 20, and that happened after the first. My thinking was maybe they're like, all right, if Tillman doesn't work, then and like it's close in the second half, then maybe we'd use him. Maybe or maybe he was never gonna play to begin with. But regardless, like I mean, maybe the thought was the risk is worth it if he just is gonna be so important to us for like a 10-minute stretch in the second half if it's close. But I'm slightly encouraged that he was at least able to warm up and was active for this game. I mean, now he still is going to need a surgery probably. Maybe there was a lot of swelling that's starting to go down, and that could continue since he didn't play tonight, and it'll be about a week after the injury, a little bit more than that for Game 5. Um, maybe again if like they're down or it's close, they'll be like, shit, it's getting desperate now. We can't go back to Dallas for a Game 6 after losing 2 in a row or something like that. But uh, I'm I'm still skeptical whether he can contribute or not. I'm just a little bit less skeptical than I was before, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, you don't know whether this is gamesmanship or something, but it's yeah, I mean, it's a possibility.
I
And
mean, they desperately missed him in this game. This is the first game where I was like, oh yeah, they really could have used a guy who protected the rim, that they kept out of the pick and roll. He at least, he's not a great rebounder, but he's at least 7'3", and he would always be there on the baseline, unlike Horford, who's going to be switching out. And also like he's another like really feared shooter who can get a shot off, or he can get to the basket and uh, get some dunks or alley oops or something. Now, how much of any of those things can he do in his physical state? I guess we'll see. But they certainly missed the healthy Porzingis tonight a ton.
they did. And so we don't know whether he will be available Monday for Game 5, much less if necessary for Game 6 or Game 7. But he would absolutely help the Boston Celtics. Whether they will attempt anything with Luke Cornett in Game 5 will remain to be seen. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they'll try some Tatum at the 5 selector players to potentially make that viable, though they're a little bit light there. They can experiment with it a little bit. And so for Boston, I think what makes why Game 4 makes Game 5 compelling is that even if the things that Dallas executed go worse, and I expect them to in Game 5 than they did in Game 4, there is enough good stuff there that I think it makes it more competitive. And like there were 2 blowouts in close game clothing in the first 3 contests of this one, and so maybe that makes it competitive. But a low 3-point shooting game for Boston, like the Mavericks absolutely can win Game 5, and of course that would make this series really really fun. So I still think Boston is a heavy, 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 heavy favorite to win the series, even if Kristaps Porzingis does not play a single second. But there is enough that Dallas did that, despite Boston outplaying the Mavs firmly in the first 3 games, including in Game 3, which Porzingis missed, to think that Dallas can credibly win Game 5.
Yeah, I think that's true. And some adjustments. I think Boston is trying to do this. They're trying to have either White or Holiday kind of run through, make the big guard him, and then go to the corner. a lot of what they're doing is, though, having that guy on the weak side. I would actually try to put that guy on the strong side and then force that big to make a decision. Are you going to help off the strong side corner? If so, I'll just throw it one pass away to Derek White or Drew Holiday for a wide open corner three. Or if you're going to stay home, now I can drive and you're not going to be there anymore. So I'd actually try to make that guy guard the strong side corner and make him make a decision more so, because you can, on the weak side, you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. Lively is incredible at closing out quickly as well. So like he can cover a lot of ground. So that would be something I would point to. Basically, they've had to go away from what they had a lot of success with in the first two games, which was having these guards be the low man and then putting Irving or Doncic as the low man and help, because the big got switched out on the perimeter. Now they're not doing that anymore. I would still be trying to, and I thought Boston should have done more of this. I would be trying to set the screen with the bigs man early in the possession. You know, there was one where they got Tatum a wide open three where Gafford just didn't get up on it. You know, and if I'm Dallas, I would say, all right, you know, we'll just play a drop coverage on those circumstances. And if you want to throw it to Al Horford on a pick and pop, which they did right at the start of the third, but like we're gonna make you beat us with that. We're not gonna like open up a bunch of layups and dunks because we're so worried about Al Horford pick and popping, right? So that might be another battleground, but I'm still setting that screen. Try to get that big out of the perimeter and up top, not out in the perimeter on the side as well. And the play better adjustment for Boston. Like Holiday was terrible. Like he missed a bunch of shots. Like these are harder shots for sure. Like they were not easy upper paint shots, but like, and PJ Washington has started guarding Holiday better after Holiday beat him up in game one. But you know, I don't know that Dallas can play as well just in terms of their individual defense as they did in this game. And I think Boston can play much better. They'll hit more shots. That'll just naturally kind of open things up. There won't be as much help. And then defensively, Boston just has to pack the paint even more. They just didn't do a good enough job of that. They need to really drill doing that off of misses in particular, where Dallas was extremely effective in this game. So they need to, no matter who's guarding whom, like Dallas is a slow offense once they get into the half court, and Boston can kind of load up and communicate really well. They got to get better at doing that in transition, because that's when Dallas is getting to the basket and they just aren't showing enough help on guys like Luka and Kyrie. So I think they just, and it's not double teaming, it's just, again, packing the paint more. And if they want to throw it to Jones Jr. or Washington or whatever, I'm still forcing those guys to beat me, hopefully above the break.
Yeah, I'm firmly on board. Firmly on board with all that. I'm trying to think if I have any other adjustments beyond that. Not really. And Boston, due to kind of where things are, they don't really have any player usage stuff. I thought this was a challenging Peyton Pritchard game at times, but I don't know that I would change anything with how they used him. It's just like there are some games where he looks a little bit worse.
Well, and I do think, though, from Boston's standpoint, you do need to start shading a little more when it's Pritchard. Or like Hauser's defended well in this series, and I don't know if Luka can play the way that he played in the first half. He still can't hit a three, too. He was 0 for 8 from three, and Irving was 1 of 6. Those two guys are 1 of 14 from three, and they win going away because they kill him in the paint. I'm not saying let those guys shoot necessarily, but you got to just have generally more help from your perimeter guys and force that pass out to some of these other above the break guys. But you got to really be loaded up. Like Hauser showed that Luka could kind of get to his spot and score on him. So we'll see whether, like, they may have gotten lulled a little bit into a false sense of security with how poorly Luka played in game 3. And so they may just need to find ways to give more help, but still not give up a corner 3 or a dunk. And there are ways to do that. All right, then. Well, we've already got 2 pods in the books today, so I think we can pack it in here. And, of course, we'll be live after Game 4 and for Game 4 as well on Playback and YouTube. We'll talk to you all then. And, of course, have more Dunked On podcasts before then.